And welcome to another episode of the Blank Page to Bestseller podcast. I am your host, Peter Wheatmartian, and on this week's episode, I have Colleen and KZ who are joining me, as always, to begin the episode with a Biz Buzz segment. In this week's Biz Buzz segment, we are focusing on some frequently asked questions that the three of us have been asked in our lives as publishing experts. And we really have some really good questions that are really important questions that I think need to be answered because it's not just one or two people asking these. These are questions that we hear quite frequently. And one thing that we have definitely noticed is, and we want to try to get away from this, is writing. Being an author is not a solitary thing. Lots of people have the same questions that you have. So if you do have any questions as an author, as a writer, please be sure to reach out to us. You can leave a comment down here in the on the episode. You can send us a message on our website, theauthorsvoice.org. You can send us a message on any of our social media platforms. But just to let you know that there are other people out there who have the same question that you do, and we're more than happy to answer any of those questions. So on this week's episode, like I said, we're talking about frequently asked questions that we had. And I want to begin with this question because I think this question is something that we've really taken to heart and we think is really important. And I'm going to ask Colleen this question. So Colleen, first of all, welcome to the show this week.
Thanks, Peter. It's nice to see you and Candy, KZ.
Well, so let me begin with this question then for you. And I think you're probably one of the best people to ask this question. How do you make your book your business?
Well, that's a big loaded question. I'm going to concentrate on a few things today, but I think it's very important that you want to make sure you're investing for success. You're going to need to spend the money in order to make money from your book. And that's because your book is a business. So you want to first start by creating a business, make it an LLC, or make your imprint, whatever you're going to do, but create that business wherever that is in your state, however they do it in your state. But you want to make it a business because in the long run, you are going to be able to make money from that business if you do the things, marketing, setting up your website, that type of thing. But books create value. Books are assets to you. They're assets for everybody else, but they're assets to you. If you do it the right way, they increase your influence, your impact, and your income. And then one thing that I think is great is books will last forever. Think about that. Books will last forever if they're hardcover, softcover, even ebooks. When you purchase an ebook, you can download that and it'll last forever. You can go back to it, spread the word with other people. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the investment. You want to invest in the people that will help you. There are so many people in the publishing world that do it with integrity and they help you. And you're going to want to invest in the proofreading, the editing, the writing coaching. Have someone help you go through it, whatever it is you need. Just make sure you consider that investment. And yes, you're not going to have probably not going to have enough money for everything. However, the investment is so important. So speak to somebody about what it's going to take and where you can go and do that investment. But a couple things I'm going to talk about how you can bring money in. And these are certainly not all of the ways you can bring money in, but some ways to set yourself up for success. Okay, so you've written your book. You're the authority on that subject that you've written about. And there's a lot of different ways to make money, like I said, and make your book your business. So you can develop online courses and coaching programs from your book. If your book discusses your expertise as a business leader, you create coaching programs and online courses that can help entrepreneurs, startup companies, businesses to scale to that new level. So you can consider an online mastermind group, one-to-one coaching, that type of thing. So develop those online courses and coaching programs. Also, here's a huge way that you can make your book your business, and that's by speaking, stepping on stage, whether that's in a podcast like today, we're talking about things, but get on a podcast. Find the way that you can get on podcasts, and it just doesn't have to be speaking with authors. Speak with other people who are coaches. Speak with other people that would resonate with what you're having to say, and collaborate with them. You can speak in person events, or coming back in person and speak in person to people. Find out how you can get to that speaking event and speak. And there's certain ways you can make money off of those speaking engagements, but that's another story. That's another day that we'll talk about that. And your online events, like I said, YouTube, put your information out on YouTube. Your YouTube channel can help you reach really hundreds, thousands of people when you do it the right way, and you're consistent about it. That's one thing. You want to be consistent about whatever you are doing. And like I said, the podcast, it's a great way for you to make money from your book. It takes strategy and it takes connecting with the people, but you can do that because you are reaching thousands of people on podcasts. People are going to hear your story. They're going to hear what you're saying. So that's a great way to bring people in. And who knows, they could be future clients for you. And then, like I said, monetizing your YouTube channels. So any of these ways are going to help you make your book your business. And your book's just the beginning. Put your business hat on, turn your book into a moneymaker. You can generate income through online courses, like I said, the coaching programs, and other speaking opportunities. So go gain that visibility, credibility, and make your book your business. That's about what I have to say for now.
Well, I think that is a wonderful answer. And let me ask you then a quick little follow-up. So this definitely sounds like more of the nonfiction side of writing. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and I apologize. I keep not forgetting about the fiction, but we're more involved in the nonfiction side of things. So that could be another discussion for another day that we'll talk about.
No, yeah, that
Oh,
is good.
I love that idea, Peter. Talking about there is a difference, not a big difference, in making your book your business with it between fiction and nonfiction. But that would be a great topic for another day. I
Uh,
can think of a number of different ways that you would turn your book, your fiction writing into a business that are different from how you would turn your nonfiction writing into a business. Although at the heart, Colleen's right. You start by setting it up as a business.
mhm. Yeah, and I think what's important most, whether you're nonfiction or fiction, when you're talking about turning your book into a business, it's all about, it all comes down to how are you finding more readers? How are you finding new readers? How are you finding readers that are going to really resonate with you and your story so that they read and then tell their friends and tell their family members and tell random strangers on the street that they love your book. So that's a really good. Thank you for that answer there, Colleen. KZ, I think you're 100% correct. We should definitely dig into maybe some of the similarities and differences between fiction and nonfiction business wise when it comes to the publishing business, the writing author business. But I do want to turn my next question over to you, KZ. First of all, welcome to the show. I didn't get to welcome you yet to the show. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you, Peter.
So for today's question for you then is, and I think this is a very important question and one that we have talked about in the past, but I don't think we've actually given specifics on in real detail. So for you, KZ, how do authors know what format they should publish in? Are certain books better for ebooks or paperbacks or hardcover, or what kind of goes into finding the right format for your book?
That is a great question, and we do get it frequently. And you're right, we haven't talked about it much here, but that's because number one, the first answer is it depends on what your goals are with your book. Okay, and so in that respect, everything I say here will be kind of general, but I can give you some really good ideas about when and what and where you can go with this. First of all, in today's world, it's very rare for a book not to come out in some sort of ebook format, some sort of digital format. Okay. So almost certainly the most logical place to start is going to be in an ebook. simply because it's very easy, relatively easy, as long as you have the right software to make the conversions, to write the book and get it into an ebook format. So that's probably the number one. It's probably the most popular. Now, is that the right one for you? Not necessarily. It depends again on what your goals are. When I'm working with most clients, we start there, and then we'll say, okay, so you want an ebook. Who's going to buy your book in an ebook? Okay. So that's the next thing we look at is we look at the different formats and we decide what market is available for that book. Okay. If you're writing a history of World War II, you might want to not stay totally in just ebook because your market is very likely to be slightly different from a book that you're writing that is talking about that has characters in grade school. Okay, they're very different markets, very different readers. Okay, so you want to think that out as well. In general, paperback is, I won't say the most popular. Ebook is the most popular. Paperback is the most popular in a printed format. Okay. And there are so many, and specifically, I would say trade paperback. There are tons of specialty formats in books, which we're not going to go into, but trade paperback, which is your standard sizes. Okay, your 5x8s, your 6x9s, and 10x7s. Those are some of the basic sizes. Those are your most popular books, and pretty much, I believe, every writer should have published at least in ebook and paperbook form. Okay. You don't have to, but I think it's important to do both of those. So when do you take the next step and go into hardback? Well, hardback is more expensive for you to publish. It's more expensive to buy. And again, you have to look at your market. Do you have people who are going to buy your hard book? Do you have people who are going to spend $50 for your book when they can buy it for $10 in paperback or $10 in ebook, depending on what your pricing is? Paperback, depending on what pricing is, it could be a lot higher for the paperback than $10, but giving you an idea there. So you want to think about that. There is one very solid reason, though, to go with ebook, paperback, and hardback. And that is to give you credibility as an author. This is especially important if you're a beginning author. It's relatively easy to turn that book, once the manuscript has been written, to turn it into any of those three formats with no problem. And it costs you at the most the time to create a new cover, because you've got to do a different cover for each format. Okay. But that's really all it's doing. And then a little bit of extra work on the back end to make sure that your printing format is set up properly. So it's a no-brainer. As a writer, if you have the opportunity, you should have all three formats. Okay. Notice I didn't say anything about audiobook. I think everyone should have an audiobook. The problem is the audiobooks are not inexpensive to create. Okay. You can do an audiobook relatively inexpensively now using an AI voice. That's up to you. It's not as controversial as you might think, but it is controversial. And to be truthful, while the quality is better than it used to be, it really isn't. It's an AI voice. Okay, there's no question about it, and that's okay. But if what you're doing is trying to build a family, then it may be worth your while. You may choose to go that direction. However, let me backtrack again. If you believe the people that are going to read and read your book are going to want it largely in audio, then do what Colleen said and invest in your business. Invest in doing a recording by a professional. Don't do it yourself. I'm sorry. Unless you are a professional recorder, don't read your own book. Okay. You certainly can if you have a good voice, but in most cases, it is not going to save you any money. It's going to cost you more in the long run because you don't have the background to do it. You're going to pay more for someone to edit that recording. So I'm getting sidetracked here. So let me go back to the concept of when you use audiobook. Audiobook is like ebook. In today's world, it should probably be there if you can get it there in any way. If your market is will buy audiobooks, then you need to be in audiobooks. And if that's the case, you budget it right up front. And here's a benefit for you. The vast majority of authors today are not in audiobook. And yet it's one of the most popular ways to read a book.
Mhm. I've got a quick little question on the audiobook side of things, just because we're talking about it right now. But when you mentioned there that most authors aren't in the audiobook format, would you say that's most like indie authors or self-published authors, or do you mean most authors in general? It seems like the more traditional publishing houses have been pretty keen to get their books out on audiobook format recently.
They are, but first timers aren't getting out in audio. They're
Mm,
putting out their established authors in audio.
mm,
And yes, definitely indie is what I was really referring to. But yeah, the big time publishers also they do well. Actually, I think Penguin, I think that's where they started. But if I'm thinking I'm correctly, but at least one of the big guys up there is started in audio. But they they are pushing it for not necessarily big names. I'd say when I look at it, it looks to me like it's the B list. But but if you're a first timer, you're back there on maybe the E list.
mhm.
Okay. um, and so they may or may not push that for you, and they may push it and expect you to take a lower a lower um, rate of pay on it, because audiobooks are not paying you as well, paying the authors as well as they're being paid in some of the other formats. That's something we've talked about before, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again. So I don't know. Did I answer the question, Peter?
No, yeah, you did. Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's good information. You can definitely, as an indie author, get a little bit of a leg up on some of the other indies if you go audiobook only.
Yeah,
Not
and that's
not audiobook only, sorry, but
no, but that
audiobook. Yeah.
agree. Yeah, and I think it's important that when you have the opportunity to earn money on a format, if you can get that format out in a way that doesn't cost you too much, and your market wants it, then you should go ahead and go for it. So
Yeah, completely agree. And I have one little follow up on just the overall types of book formats, if you don't mind. Um, so I'm thinking back more on the I don't want to say the olden days of publishing, but the earlier in publishing, it seemed like with the main traditional publishers, most books would be turned out in hardback first, and then I guess if they were successful enough, they would get a trade paperback, to fill in the catalog. Is that it seems like it's kind of different now. It seems like a lot of people are going more paperback first, and then if they have like a special edition or a big or looking for a big release, might go paperback at that time. Is that am I kind of um following that trend?
following that's definitely a trend that we've seen, and you're right. The big publishers are still putting out first in hardback. In a lot of your, especially for their A list, they come out first in hardback. That's where they're making their money. I mean, it doesn't really cost them all that much more to print it in hardback than it does in softback, but they charge a whole lot more. Okay. And then the paperback comes out after that. But in the indie world, it's rarely done that way because the indie market is different. They don't want to pay the money for the hardback. Um, Now, the one exception to that might be if you're in if when you're in the specialty market like photography or something like that, or even cookbooks. It's another good one. Okay, we're working. I'm working with a cookbook author right now who's coming out in hardback, and that's the only format she's going to choose, which makes sense. Okay, so when you're in the specialty market, certainly hardback would make more sense to come out with that first, and maybe that's the only one you come out with, depending on where you want to go.
No, yeah, that's some really good information. And like you said at the very beginning of your answer, I mean, this is not a be all end all to end the conversation on what format you should do. Definitely have a conversation with some sort of publishing professional, whether it be us, whether it be someone who's designing your book, whoever that may be, to help you understand what might be the most beneficial format for you when you're first publishing your book.
Absolutely. And don't forget to check with your marketing person, right, Colleen?
Right, exactly. Marketing, marketing. Hey, can I add something to that real
Yeah,
quick? Peter,
yeah.
maybe you'll put the link to the video or to the podcast we had, but we spoke with Von Foy recently, and he helps people get their books in audio uh, and teaches them how to do it and can help them with the, you know, uh, editing it and that type of stuff. But again, that's an investment, but it does come out in your own voice as an author. So that's something just to put out there.
No, yeah, that's really good. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, we really enjoyed. Me and Colleen both interviewed Vaughn for the show a couple of weeks ago. So if you haven't listened to that yet, please be sure. I'll put the link down to that interview down in the show notes. It's a really good question, or really
And
good. Um, yeah,
let me
go
add
ahead.
something to what I said earlier too. When I said you shouldn't record your own, you shouldn't unless you have professional help.
Mhm.
Right, right.
And I
I
should
just
have made
wanted
that
to,
clear. I'm
I
glad
just
you brought it up, Colleen.
just to, since we had interviewed him a while ago.
Oh yeah, that's really good. So Colleen, Casey, anything else on the formats, or do you think we've answered that question? I think we've pretty much covered it, unless there's anything you guys think.
Nope, nothing on my end. I think we're done.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to then ask myself a question because I'm the host and also the question answerer for this one. Question answerer. But
English,
Question asker.
English is his first language, honestly.
I promise you that. Sometimes I don't think it straight through when I first speak it, though. That's why I'm a better writer, right? But the other question that we wanted to ask today is how do you, as an author, as a writer, know if the publisher or the publishing service company that you are working with or would like to work with is reputable? And the reason we want to ask this question is because I think one of the most common things that we have seen is um, less than reputable people out there just to make a quick buck, and they don't really, one, they don't treat the authors correctly, and two, even if it looks like or there's some, if it looks too good to be true, it might be too good to be true things going on out there. Would you both agree with that? Colleen,
Yes.
Definitely. I did.
Casey?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Colleen, I do want to highlight um your story from 10, 15 years ago now or so. I think that's the reason that you and by extension me got into the publishing world was because you were pretty much taken advantage of by a not reputable company because you paid them to publish your book and you ended up with a book that was riddled with errors and mistakes, and to this day I don't even think I know where to buy that book, and I'm not sure that it's even available for sale because we've never done anything with it because it's so poor.
Yeah, I don't think that I know that we have not done anything with it, and I haven't even looked for it. Um, but that was a time where I was just very informed on what can happen, and I went in clueless, actually trusting someone else, and that was my problem. I don't ask enough questions. I don't vet enough.
And Casey, I think you've had some stories with some less than reputable publishers in your publishing journey too. Am I correct in that?
I've been pretty lucky because I when I came into the publishing world, for the most part, I was asking the questions because I came in both as a coach and as a writer. So I was seeing the stories.
Mhm.
So but yeah, no, there's no question about it. I've been taken too. We've all been taken at different levels. And it's how, but getting back to your question though, Peter, how do you know who's reputable and who isn't? That's the heart of the whole thing. And sometimes you don't, sometimes, but Colleen's right. You ask the questions.
Mhm.
And you probably have other thoughts in mind too, but that to me, that makes the most sense is ask the questions, do your due diligence, and do your homework.
Yeah, that's really what it boils down to. I do want to point out, I think we talked about the Authors Guild a couple of months ago on the show.
Yep.
They're a place that has a list of basically reputable versus non-reputable publishing services, publishing companies. The other thing that I want to point out is when it comes to publishing, and it is a bit of an antiquated definition, but traditional publishers are publishers that will pay you some advance or pay you royalties for the sales of your book, and you're not paying the traditional publisher to publish your work. So that is not saying that they are more reputable always, but there usually is more there's usually more chance that they stay reputable throughout the process because they're selling books. Their whole goal is to sell books. And if they can't sell books, they're out of business. So that's one way to kind of look at reputable companies. If they're a traditional publisher, if they're giving you advance, giving you royalties, that's usually a sign of a more reputable player in the industry. There are some companies, we kind of talked a little bit about a few things before we hopped on the call today to record, but there are a few companies out there. You see them sometimes on like cable networks. You see them sometimes on just like like TV advertisements, radio advertisements, things like that, that are like, hey, give me $10,000 and I'll publish your book. They're clearly targeting people who don't know what they're really doing. And more often than not, um, you're going to have some I would say you're more likely to run into issues if you're paying someone to publish a book. I've seen a lot of those pop up recently. KZ, I think you said you saw a couple of those advertisements recently too.
Yeah, maybe I've just been on the right channels, but or maybe I've just been watching too much late night TV. I don't know, but I've seen a couple of those pop up, and I cringe when I see them because I recognize who they're targeting, and I recognize that the people they're targeting don't know what's happening. Here's something that this is a silly tip, but it usually works for me. If I'm looking at a publishing company, okay, and one of the things they do is they change their name, so you have to keep looking at everybody who pops up.
Mhm.
The first thing I look at in their rules and what they're offering is, am I required to buy so many books?
Mhm. That's
Okay,
a
if they're saying
really
to me,
good yes.
I've got to buy a garage full of books. Well, you're not my publisher. I'm sorry.
Mhm. Because they're relying on you to sell your book instead of being a publisher and actually going out and working with distributors and working with retailers to sell the book.
But
They're
even,
requiring you to do it.
no, but even more, what they're doing is they're recouping their costs by charging you
Right,
to
right.
buy. They're going to do a first run print regardless. So in order to pay for that, you're paying for it.
Hmm.
If they never sell a book, they got their money out of it.
Hmm. Yeah, that is definitely a really good piece of advice because oh man, we've come across we've had some coaches in the past that we've worked with. One of our coaches, she said that that happened to her. She had 500 books sitting in her garage for years upon years upon years just because that's what the publisher made her do. And
Yep.
obviously that's not helping you if you're paying for 500 books and they're just sitting in your garage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I do want to point out too what you said there. If the company's like changing their name or it's hard to pin down um, kind of when they started or where they came from, that can be another heads up. we were talking about this earlier, and I do want to point it out because it's a big story that I saw over the weekend. Coming out of the UK, there is a publisher, a crowdfunding publisher, that has gone, I guess, belly up and changed its name, got bought out, but not really bought out. And we're going to talk more about that specifically on next week's show because it's a big story, but we want to definitely be able to do some more research before we talk, details and specifics about that. But if you're following any of the news, it's the Unbound Publishing, or what is now called Boundless Publishing.
Boundless Publishing Group, I think.
Yeah, public. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that in next week's episode. Just wanted to kind of give you a heads up because I think that's a pretty big news story, and I definitely think it goes to what we're talking about here is how do you know if a company is reputable or not? Colleen, anything that you think would add to finding a reputable publisher?
I don't know. I had a thought, and you guys can tell me what you think. But I know you don't want to go to somebody who's going to charge you for not what you're going to get.
Mhm.
But at the same end of the spectrum, just because you're paying someone a very, very low price does not mean that you're going to get quality work. So watch out for that too.
Yes, wow, that's huge, Colleen. And not only that, but a lot of times that's a come up. They'll say, "Oh, we'll give you this for this low price," and then you don't find out until you're too far into it to get out of it that you're paying a higher price for other things down the line.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really important. And I think the other distinction that we want to maybe point out is I think we're talking a lot about publishers right now, but Colleen brings in the publishing services side of things because a lot of indie authors, independent authors, remember, as an independent author, what are you? You are the publisher. So you have to take on all of the roles of a publishing company to make sure your book is sold and you're making sales, and that sometimes means working with professionals like editors, marketers, things like that. So Colleen, I think, definitely points out if you're working with a publishing services provider who's charging you dirt cheap, you're going to get dirt cheap work.
Yep, 100%.
So there's a lot of different things that you can kind of be on the lookout for. Another thing, and I know this sounds silly, but like just give them a check out on Facebook or on Instagram or on LinkedIn or wherever it is. If they're actually out there, either actively selling books or if they're actively engaged in the community and, are providing good, valuable information, that's usually a good sign that they're reputable and not just out there, earning a quick buck. Is there anything else on this topic that I think, or that we need to cover? I think we've covered pretty much of it, but again, it's not a be all end all of this answer either, because you do have to do a little bit of research yourself on how to on what might be a reputable publisher.
Totally agree, Peter. I think we've covered it as well as we can in the time we've given ourselves to cover it. And certainly our readers, our listeners should come back because this won't be the last time we talk about this. This is something that all three of us are heavily committed to providing ethical services to all of our clients and our friends.
Yeah, and just to close out on that, if you are having any questions on if this is a reputable publisher or not, there are there are more resources out there than you can think that'll list off some reputable services, or if anyone is not reputable, it's pretty easy to find because people are more than likely going to be talking about it.
Yep.
Well, I think that kind of wraps up this week's Biz Buzz segment. Unless anyone has anything else, I think we're good. But Colleen, KZ, thank you for joining me. Again, like I said at the very beginning of the segment, listeners, if you have any questions, you're not alone. You've probably asked the same question that 5, 10, 100 other authors have asked. So please be sure, don't feel bad about asking for asking questions. Reach out, let us know if you do have any questions. Like I said, down in the show notes, or down in the comments, down on our YouTube comments, down on social media, wherever it is you find us. Let us know. Ask us a question. Send us a message. We'd love to be able to help you maybe find that reputable publisher, or maybe discover what the right format for your book is. We'd love to answer and help you in whatever way we can. So until next week, then I'm going to say this has been our Biz Buzz segment for this week. And like I said, we'll be back next week with a more in-depth discussion on a specific publisher, the boundless / unboundless publisher.